Thank you. And so I'm Sandy Serini Elzer, and I am the League of Women Voters of Michigan Advocacy Committee on the Advocacy Committee, and I'm the liaison to the League's statewide environmental network. And so we have a lot of people here from the environmental network and and other league members. So we're so glad to have you here. And we're also glad to have our expert presenters, Robin Gleason and Jackie Goodman. They're going to speak about climate change and why this is humanity's moment. And unfortunately, this is a perfect week for a presentation on climate change, all the dangerously hot temperatures all over Michigan and the Midwest. So we're recording this presentation, so we ask everybody to please mute yourself and feel free to turn off your video if you want to. If you submitted questions in advance, we've sent them to Jackie and Robin to incorporate in their presentation. If you have questions during the presentation, please put them in the chat and we'll ask Robin and Jackie to answer them at the end of the presentation. Robin and Jackie have put together a great list of resources for fighting climate change. So early next week, we'll email the resources and the YouTube recording to all of you and for everybody who registered for this program. And so as a reminder, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization. The League works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, such as the importance of addressing climate change while we still can. The League also works to influence public policy through education and advocacy. And to further our education goal, I'm very pleased that Jackie Goodman and Robin Gleason have agreed to spend some time with us today to talk about
this meeting is being recorded
and what we can do to make sure our planet continues to be a livable place for all of us, our children and our grandchildren. Robin is a geologist, an educator, a polar expert, and a League member. Her field research for her master's thesis was in Antarctica. And this work inspired her efforts to share and protect the beauty of the polar regions and educate national and international audiences about the threats of climate change. Jackie is a professor emerita of sociology, State University of New York, with a PhD in anthropology. Since retirement from Eastern Michigan University, she's been a co-facilitator of Third Act Educators and team leader of the Climate Law IRA project, where she and her teams do presentations on climate change around the country. Both are longtime members of the nonprofit, nonpartisan Climate Reality Project, founded by Al Gore. So with that, I am pleased to turn the program over to Jackie and Robin.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Sandy. Yes, I'm Robin, and I'm going to be starting our presentation. Jackie and I are members, as Sandy mentioned, of the Climate Reality Project, which is a nonprofit organization founded by former Vice President Al Gore about 20 years ago. And it is a global network of about 3.5 million people working to build a just and sustainable true net zero future. Our goal is to reach across to every sector of society, to educate and mobilize action. And that's what we're doing here, trying to educate. So thanks for being with us. I'm going to jump right in with our slides. Our talk is split between the two of us, and I will speak first about the urgency of the climate crisis and why this moment is so critical. I'm going to recap the problems we're facing and share the solutions that we have in hand today. Jackie will follow with a discussion of big changes happening nationally with environmental policy. There's so much to cover in our 45 minutes or so. So we're going to jump right in. Here goes. So let's just go over some of the basics of why we're having a climate crisis. We're really talking about global warming because that is the true problem behind what's going on. On our planet, we have solar radiation reaching the planet in the form of light waves passing through the atmosphere. And they reach our Earth and warm the planet. Most of the radiation is absorbed by the Earth and warms it. Let's see, some of the energy is radiated back into space by the Earth in the form of infrared waves. And that has been going on ever since our atmosphere formed. And it's a really good thing that our atmosphere is there to hold extra heat closer to the planet. Some of the outgoing radiation is trapped by that Earth's atmosphere and warms it additionally. And that is a good thing. Because of that added heat, we have the perfect environment for life to have been able to evolve on the planet. The problem arises when that atmosphere is thickening due to increasing carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases going into that layer. As through many activities, many of them human, that atmosphere is thickening, and there's an increase in infrared radiation that is getting trapped. So if we were to look at our atmosphere, which actually we can through the eyes of the International Space Station, we're actually looking at our atmosphere. These are the lowermost 2 levels of the atmosphere. And we can see this beautiful shield around the planet. And we're looking at the troposphere and the stratosphere. But it is into this protective shield around us that we are spewing tons of man-made global warming pollution into that very thin shell. About 162 million tons of global warming pollution every hour. We're treating it as though it's an open sewer.
24 hours.
As we think about it, every time we drive a car and we burn 1 gallon of gasoline, that's 19 pounds of carbon dioxide that's going into the atmosphere. So it's not hard to imagine that through all of humanity, we are putting this much excess global warming pollution in. There are many, many sources of greenhouse gases. And greenhouse gases include carbon dioxide and methane and nitrous oxide and chlorofluorocarbons and even water vapor. And I could talk about this slide for a very long time, but I don't have the time. So what I want to focus in, I'll briefly mention that there are things like permafrost, which is perennially frozen land up in the Arctic region that is sequestering or holding on to a tremendous amount of methane. But as the planet warms and as that is thawing, it's releasing methane into the atmosphere. There's twice as much methane in permafrost as there is in the atmosphere today. So there are real dangers here. Landfills also contribute a lot of methane. Industrial agriculture introduces a lot of methane. And then we have the burning of forests, which not only destroys the lungs of our planet through burning the forests, but it is also adding all that extra carbon dioxide. So all these things are contributing, but by far the greatest contributors to global warming pollution are the burning of fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are fuels that have been, they formed at the time of the dinosaurs. Hundreds of millions of years ago, they were plants that were alive that became buried in swamps, and they decomposed and formed this fossil fuel. And as long as it stayed in the ground, it wasn't contributing anything to the atmosphere. But as we extract it from the ground, coal or petroleum or natural gas, and burn it, it's putting so much of these gases into the atmosphere. So you can see how from the start of the Industrial Revolution in the mid-1800s through 2023, how the numbers of billions of metric tons of carbon dioxide have increased in our atmosphere. I'm having some trouble advancing my slides. There we go. This shows 800,000 years of history, which is really just a very short glimpse of geologic time. But if we look, there's a cyclicity to increases and decreases in carbon dioxide. This is showing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. But look towards the present time, how it's a vertical line. That's because the carbon dioxide has increased so rapidly. We're now at 420 parts per million. We have not had this level of CO2 in the atmosphere since Pliocene time, which is 3.5 million years ago. So very fast indeed. Heat is the #1 climate-related cause of death. So with the added heat temperatures of the air, it's causing a lot of death. So here in Texas alone, in last year, there were over 300 deaths just from the air temperatures alone. This is not just a problem in the United States, of course. Many parts of the tropics in particular, where 3 billion people call home, their homes will become unlivable due to heat and humidity if global temperatures rise more than 1.5 degrees C. So just for perspective, we're currently at 1.2 degrees C of temperature increase from pre-industrial levels. We will almost certainly exceed 1.5 degrees in the next 5 years. There have been periods of time recently when we have exceeded 1.5 global average, but not for an extended period of time. Our goal for the long term is to limit global temperatures to 1.5. That is the boundary beyond which we're going to have devastating effects of heat and serious weather issues, cyclones, typhoons, hurricanes, fires, and so forth. But the battle for 1.5 degrees for the long term will be won or lost in the 2020s. This is really humanity's moment. This is truly the moment to act. The next 18 months will really determine the future, and the need for action right now is unprecedented. There are areas of our planet that are deemed uninhabitable due to temperatures and humidity. In Africa, you can see these black spots. Those are currently uninhabitable zones. But by 2070, without mitigation of these climate issues, these areas that are sort of grayish beige, these will become Earth's uninhabitable zones if we don't mitigate the problem, if we don't decarbonize. So that is large sections of almost every continent. The air temperatures in the US, we know, have increased. We're in the process of a heat dome right now where tens of millions of people are being affected. As we know, as you probably know, we've had 12 straight months of the hottest months ever recorded on the planet. And the last 6 years have been the hottest 6 years on record. Last year alone in August in North America, we had all of these locations in the darker brown color reach temperatures of over 104 degrees. That's not survivable. So these extreme temperatures are causing a lot of death. Of course, this is not limited to North America. It's happening all over the world. We've seen recently a lot of reports of temperatures near 124, 125 degrees. That's just not livable. And many of these places experiencing the worst heat are areas that have that are poor and communities of color. And they are most affected by heat waves due to the urban heat island effect. And that is in cities where largely very few trees exist in these areas. So they don't have the shade, they don't have the green space. There's a lot of concrete, there's a lot of black pavement, and this absorbs so much more heat. So there's a disproportionate number of poor and people of color who are being affected by this. And it becomes a real climate justice issue. And that's one of the things that we are fighting about. In places where there's permafrost, such as this area in Siberia called Verkhoyansk, this is perennially frozen land. But in 2020, and I know since that date, it has reached very high temperatures. At 100.4 degrees, this permafrost starts thawing, releasing a lot of methane. But despite all these events happening as a result of increased air temperature, most of the extra heat trapped by man-made pollution is going into the ocean. 93% goes into the oceans. And as ocean temperatures increase, there's more and more evaporation and more moisture in the sky, and that is fueling bigger and bigger storms. This graph there's a lot going on here, but basically on this axis, it's showing the heat content measured in joules, and then these different colors show different water depths. But really what it's showing is an increase in the heat content of the ocean from 1960 through 2020. And in the last 20 years, half of this increase occurred. So the heat content in the oceans is accelerating through time. This is fueling bigger and more powerful storms. In 2023, for the first time on record, storms reached Category 5 strength in every single tropical ocean basin in the same year. That has never happened before. And we know what the damage that these large storms do. Hurricane Laura, the strongest recorded hurricane ever to strike Louisiana, grew from a Cat 1 to a Cat 4 storm in a single day. There's so much energy in the oceans that they're accelerating very quickly. We probably remember the back-to-back hurricanes Eta and Iota that hit Central America in 2020. That was another rapidly forming hurricane, a Cat 4 storm. And that has created, as so many of these storms do, climate refugees, people whose homes and livelihood and food supplies have been devastated, so they need to leave. And so they move to try to find homes and land elsewhere. Well, this displacement of so many people is devastating. It results in wars and conflict, food insecurity, suffering, and high death tolls. Not all of this ocean energy is funneled into hurricanes. There's a lot of simply powerful storms that are hitting that are not hurricanes, that don't happen during hurricane season. Here's a picture of a superstorm hitting Midland, Texas. Actually, as we speak, there's a tremendous storm hitting Texas as well. This one dropped about 10 inches of precipitation in 2021, and it completely flooded the area. These torrential rains that happen periodically are not, but they're happening more and more frequently. They're not falling where rain is necessarily most needed, nor where it's predicted. They fall kind of randomly and they cause tremendous flooding. Here was another such event that happened just this past March, where more than 30 million people were under flood alerts because of a powerful storm. It's flooding areas, causing a lot of erosion and doing a lot of damage. So where there's increased evaporation, there's more precipitation or rainfall. That precipitation causes floods and infrastructure damage and erosion and contamination, because contaminated waste sites get flooded, and all of that goes into streams that go into rivers and back to the ocean, and the cycle continues, the hydrological cycle. But that same extra heat that pulls water from the ocean, causing bigger downpours and floods, is also pulling a lot of moisture from the soil and more quickly. So that's causing longer and deeper droughts. Soil is becoming very parched. Here is a former water, this was a water, I'm losing my words. It was a water system in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and it has completely lost all of its water. It's completely evaporated. So the water supply for this area is greatly diminished, creating a lot of hardships for the people who live there. It caused $3 billion of damages because of this evaporation from the soil and from ponded water. A lot of the world uses water from the ground, from aquifers. Groundwater levels in Europe reached alarmingly low levels in 2020 and since, because they're not getting the replenishment of rainfall, because the rain doesn't necessarily fall where it's needed. So people are more and more reliant on groundwater, but the wells have to go deeper and deeper, and it's coming in short supply. We also know that hotter years are typically followed by more fires, or they're related, they're closely associated with more fires. This is a graph from the US West showing fires and how they follow the pattern of temperature between 1980 and 2018, but we know this is a worldwide pattern. You'll remember last year, we had a lot of fires throughout North America, and they were larger fires, over 1,000 acres. And this resulted in wildfire smoke throughout much of Eastern North America. This was New York and New Jersey in June. Our air didn't look so different from that. So there's a rapid increase in these worldwide extreme weather catastrophes. In the last 40 years, or from 1980 to 2020, this shows the increase in extreme temperatures, droughts, and fires in the red, in floods and mudslides in the blue, and in storms in the brown. So rapid increase in these events. There is a lot of ice, both in alpine areas and in the polar regions, that is melting as a result of this increased temperature. As ice melts, it becomes water, and water flows out to the oceans. So we also have the problem of increased sea level as a result of melting ice. This graph shows the decline of ice mass in Greenland for the last couple of decades. This is certainly continuing. The Greenland ice sheet is melting about 4 times faster than originally thought, and more is melting from the permanent ice sheet than from alpine glaciers. Another added issue is that when either sea ice or glacier or ice sheets melt, they are white, they're reflective. The sun hits them and is reflected. But when they're gone, that blue ocean underneath or the black rock underneath is now exposed, and that absorbs much more heat. So it's a kind of runaway effect from the melting of this white ice and snow. If all of Greenland melts, and the fear is if we hit 1.5 or higher for a sustained period of time, Greenland is very likely to completely melt in time. That would cause about a 7-meter rise in global sea level. The West Antarctica, which is a portion of Antarctica, that would be about a 6-meter rise. Combined, that's a 13-meter rise, about 45 feet of sea level. That's a big increase in global sea level. That would flood much of the world's coastlines and all the people who live there. In the US alone, if there were a 2 degrees sea rise, 12 million people could lose their homes. This is unacceptable. Globally, this is a list of the top 10 cities at risk from sea level rise by the year 2070 if we do not mitigate this problem. This is a graph showing by monetary value, by assets, in trillions of US dollars. Miami is actually at the very top of the list. And then you see other cities at risk. And this next graph shows the population at risk if by 2070. And this is in millions of dollars. Calcutta is at the very top. Asia would be very badly hit. And many of the people who are most impacted are countries or cities that have had no involvement or minimal involvement in producing these greenhouse gases. There's a lot of inequity there. The US counties most vulnerable to disaster are those that are listed here, many of them in Texas, and they happen to be about 81% minority on average. So again, this climate justice issue is very real. A lot of infrastructure is at risk from extreme weather as well. I certainly don't have time to talk about all of these different kinds of infrastructure. But one thing that it hits close to home for some of us is the Sanford Dam. This was an area that about 4 years ago had a torrential rain, unexpected. It was a torrential rainfall that broke the dam and flooded the town of Sanford, which is very close to the Dow Chemical Company in Midland. So that breach of the dam flooded the Dow Chemical Company and forced it to close its headquarters and shut down operations for some time. Tragically, the Dow Company is a Superfund toxic waste site. So we had these floodwaters mixing with the waste stream of this company and mixing with the groundwater, mixing with the surface water, and affecting a lot of communities. Nationwide, 60% of Superfund sites are threatened by flooding, storm surges, and other damaging effects of climate change. Here was another event in Port Arthur, Texas, due to Hurricane Harvey. It was flooded and it resulted in more than 100 toxic chemical releases. And again, this disproportionately hit low-income and minority communities. So the cost of carbon is enormous. I could go on and on, but I'm not going to. I think we know what's at stake. So must we change? I think you would agree with me that we must. Can we change? That is the big question that we are facing. We have solutions at hand right now, today. We have solutions in many forms. US wind energy capacity grew tremendously between the year 2000 and the present. This shows in gigawatts of wind capacity how it's grown from the year 2000 to 2023. There are wind farms in many locations that can produce, and if they had more wind turbines, the US as a whole could produce 13 times its current electricity needs just with onshore wind. That doesn't include any offshore wind farms, just onshore. Globally, if we look worldwide, wind could supply worldwide energy, electricity consumption 40 times over. We need the turbines, we need the infrastructure. We need buy-in, we need investment in these green technologies. The solar story is even more promising. The US installations have grown from 1980 to 2023. You can see the phenomenal growth in US solar. At the same time, due to innovations and research and development, crystalline silicon, which we need in the solar panels, has come down to record low prices, 11 cents per watt, and that is making this more and more feasible. We have so much wind, so much sun at our disposal. Enough solar energy reaches the earth every hour to fill all the energy needs for an entire year. We just need to get out there. We need to fund it, not just in this country, but share that technology worldwide. New energy capacity in the United States was 80% solar, wind, and battery storage, which was a very promising outcome. We need to stay on this trajectory. As we know, electric cars are increasing. Last year, we sold 1.5 million electric vehicles. Solar panels are coming out with great speed, and they're creating a lot of jobs. In 2022, as of 2022, there were over 3 million clean energy jobs, and this could grow a great deal, not only in this country, but worldwide. There are so many innovations in addition to solar and wind, but they need investment. They need money. They need the chance to grow and materialize. Once the world reaches net zero CO2 emissions, global temperatures will stop increasing in as soon as 3 to 5 years. That's what has to happen in this critical moment. If we halted our net CO2 emissions, about half the humate CO2 would be removed from the atmosphere and absorbed into trees and the ocean within about 30 years. But well before that 30-year mark, we would start to see changes in our climate. So can we change? Unquestionably, yes, we can change. Will we change? And that is a question that needs to be answered. But right now, I'm going to turn it over to Jackie, who will talk a lot more about changes that are happening at the policy level with a lot more positive news. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Jackie.
Well, thanks so much, Robin, for that excellent information, those terrific slides. And I also wanted to thank Sandra for inviting me to speak to this incredible group, League of Women Voters. So let me get my slides up here, which will take a little finagling. So bear with me for a second, please. Let's see. So first thing to do is share the screen. And advanced portion. Okay. And hang on just a second. Okay. So I'm going to talk about some solutions and some policies that exist right now. And this was actually, I was first introduced to this by Al Gore and his training from the Climate Reality Project. So what is the solution? This is a book jacket called Humanity, of a book by Joelle Gurgis called Humanity's Moment, A Climate Scientist, Case for Hope. And she has basically, she was an IPCC scientist who wrote this book because she was so depressed by all the information that Robin just shared with you and more, that she wanted to share with the public the fact that we still have time to turn this situation around. And most scientists are saying we have this decade to fix this. So how can we reduce our carbon footprint? What can we do as individuals and collectively? And that's what I'm going to talk about are both of those aspects, the individual acts we can take and the collective acts we can take. So can individuals make a collective, a financial impact? As individuals, we can reduce our carbon footprint with personal financial decisions. The richest 10% of Americans account for 40% of US climate emissions. Why? Because of our financial investments, where our money is located. Big banks and financial institutions make huge investments in coal, gas, and oil. Chase, Citibank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo make over $3 trillion in loans to fossil fuel companies. So what can we do individually? You can write letters to your bank. You can move your money to banks that are not making these kinds of investments, move your credit card. Individually, you can lobby your congressperson to support the Fossil-Free Finance Act, which is a bill requiring big banks to stop financing big oil and coal. And collectively, I'm sure you've read about some of this, states are initiating lawsuits against companies for environmental damages to their states and communities. So specifically, Vermont and Hawaii are holding Exxon and Chevron liable for extreme weather damages. Last year, there were terrible floods in Vermont, and of course, Hawaii had those terrible fires. Another thing is collectively, students and I'm trying to get rid of everybody. So, okay, there we go. Students, alumni, and others are supporting divestment campaigns that have pushed universities, pension funds, banks, and other institutions to divest their endowments of fossil fuel investments. Globally, 1,600 institutions representing $40.6 trillion in assets are cutting their ties, divesting from their fossil fuel investments. And some of the most recent of these divestment commitments were made by the Church of England, New York University, and the National Academy of Medicine. Individuals can also consider a flight diet, take fewer flights, because one round trip flight from New York to Europe, San Francisco, creates a warming effect equivalent to 2 or 3 tons of CO2 per person. Another issue is, yeah, I'm getting a reverberation.
Okay, I'm right in the middle of a webinar now, so if it was like.
Okay. Sandra, are we on?
Yes, I think I got them.
Okay, great. So another thing that we can do is decrease the amount of food we waste. When we throw out food, we're also wasting all the energy and water it takes to grow, harvest, transport, and package. And when food goes to the landfill and rots, it produces methane, a gas that, as Robin mentioned, traps heat even more potent than CO2. So we can change culture. It's slow, but it's possible. We can change our behaviors. If you think back to the days of the 1960s and 70s, for some of you who might be my age, there were just a bunch of hippies during Earth Day who wanted to recycle. And now, of course, there are states and communities across the country where it is law. So behavior can change. Another issue, of course, is in electric vehicles. When you switch to an electric vehicle, it's certainly better than carpooling in a gas-powered car. The electric cars can reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 54% compared to conventional gas-powered cars. So EVs save much more in carbon dioxide emissions than carpooling. And the good news, according to the Rocky Mountain Institute, is that EVs are actually becoming more affordable due to more efficient manufacturing, falling battery costs, and more intense competition, which are lowering the sticker prices. And that's hot off the press, that information. Collectively, we can hold policymakers accountable. I'm way in the back of that crowd wearing a straw hat of about 75,000 other environmentalists in New York City last September 2023. We were calling on the world leaders at the UN, so we were walking toward the UN to stop investing in fossil fuel. And luckily, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres made a speech that day. He's a tremendous advocate for climate justice, and he stated, "Our focus here is on climate solutions. Our task is urgent. Humanity has opened the gates of hell. We have to end fossil fuel subsidies, which the IMF estimates reached $7 trillion in 2022. Collectively, we can hold our governments accountable to live up to existing international agreements. The 2015 Paris Climate Accord was signed by 195 governments. And the agreement was to lower greenhouse gas emissions to no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial temperatures. But the problem is, this is a voluntary agreement amongst these countries. And again, we have to hold our leaders accountable. In Brazil, the president is Lula da Silva, and he committed to reforestation of the Amazon rainforest, which is a huge carbon sink. In other words, it absorbs the CO2 from the atmosphere. But his predecessor was very much in favor of deforestation. And this is a photo from the rainforest of the deforestation going on in the Amazon rainforest, and then the reforestation under Lula. And of course, many of you are familiar that there was recently a new president elected in Mexico who not only is a woman, but she is also a climate scientist. And Mexico recently had a deadly heat wave and a dire climate-fueled water crisis. Mexico City is predicted to run out of water sometime this summer. And so her agenda is to cut fossil fuel use in the country, in Mexico, and increase electrification. So political leadership matters in the United States as well. Collectively, environmentalists have pressured the federal government, and the current administration enacted a new rule to cut methane emissions. And the government now requires oil and gas producers to find and fix all the methane gas leaks at their sites. And here's a photo from the New York Times. This is invisible methane gas, but somehow or another they were able to capture this in the photo, make it visible. Similarly, collectively, environmentalists pressured the government, and the current federal administration enacted a new EPA regulation to cut pollution from coal-fired power plants, requiring existing coal plants to reduce 90% of pollution by 2039, and future high-capacity power plants to cut 90% of pollution by 2032. Apparently, fossil fuel corporations and their supporters in Congress are currently trying to prevent this rule from ever going into effect. So this is very recently passed, so we'll see what happens with the pressure from both sides. Again, political leadership matters. A new federal program was recently enacted to provide green jobs for young people, to conserve lands and waters, to advance environmental justice, and to tackle climate change overall. Another new rule that was just enacted, again, environmentalists rallied, and the federal EPA, here you see the EPA administration leader, Michael Regan, announced a new rule to cut tailpipe emissions with the goal that the majority of new vehicle sales will be electric vehicles by 2032. And the largest climate law that has ever been passed in the United States was passed in 2022, signed by the president, and it's called the Inflation Reduction Act, also known as the IRA. There was also a bipartisan law passed called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. The goal of these laws is to cut the nation's heat-trapping emissions in half by 2030 and eliminate them by 2050.
Wow.
So how does this IRA climate law reduce emissions? Billions of dollars are provided by this law for new investments in clean energy and jobs for individuals, communities, and businesses. So there's solar over here, there's the wind energy, there's reforestation, there is electric transportation, there is investment in research and development in solar and wind and manufacture. And in addition, the current federal administration issued a new rule to speed up federal construction permitting for clean energy projects so that it won't take years and years of red tape to enact these new projects. The IRA also has a significant healthcare component. It has ensured that 63,000 Michiganders were able to keep their health insurance, and it reduces the cost of insulin for nearly 67,000 seniors. This link here, which is a live link, gives you all the health data for each state. So I do have a document that Sandra will be distributing, and all of the links I have on my on this document will be available to you. The IRA, BIL, has provided these financial incentives to states, communities, and businesses. And what you see on this climate action map are all these little dots. The green dots represent clean energy and power projects. The orange dots are clean transportation, like zero emission school buses. The pink dots are environmental resilience and remediation for brown sites or polluted areas. Purple dots are the infrastructure, and agriculture are the gray dots. So again, this is a wonderful map. You can open this up yourself. I suppose I can't open it in this format, but you can enlarge it and you can see all the projects that are going on in Michigan in particular. And here are a couple of examples. As of April, Michigan ranked #1 in the country for new clean energy projects. And this is an actual project in Lansing, Michigan. And this is the actual plant director of a new EV. It's a Energy Solutions Michigan, Inc., and they are producing battery cells. And 1,500 new jobs as construction workers were created to build this plant. Here's another example in Saginaw County, and you see the governor announcing the groundbreaking of a $375 million expansion of a semiconductor chip plant in Saginaw County. 170 new high-wage clean energy jobs were created. And again, this is part of the IRA and the BIL. The IRA funds also go to these clean energy school buses and schools in K through 12 schools. And these are important links that anybody who has connections to K through 12 should absolutely look at this, send this information to your superintendents, your principals, because so far the schools in Michigan have gotten $50 million in IRA rebates for these zero emission school buses. And you can see that there are cities all around the world that are engaged in this process. The IRA, of course, is just for the United States. And then the IRA also provides for what's called the Justice 40. And that refers to environmental justice. And this is a map, this link here, which again, if I opened it, it points out all the communities around the country which are targeted by the IRA as sites that are due funding based on this environmental justice, the fact that they have been harmed by environmental pollution, and they are getting grants to clean up these areas. So Michigan, as of a couple of months ago, received $20 million in grants for these environmental justice communities, remediation, pollution reduction, etc. In addition to the federal IRA and BIL climate laws, and the new EPA rules, federal EPA rules, the governor of Michigan passed one of the most climate smart laws in the country for the state of Michigan. It requires the state to generate all its electricity by wind, solar, and other non-carbon sources by 2040. And some had asked in your written questions about legislation to support, and from your group here. And one area that can be supported is to amend the Michigan Clean Energy and Jobs Act that was enacted in 2023. And this act aims for 60% renewable energy by 2035, 100% clean energy by 2040. And these are wonderful things. Critics have argued the problem is the current law includes sources of energy or projects that are considered false solutions from an environmental justice approach. So, for example, carbon capture is a very controversial approach that often fossil fuel companies are promoting, and environmentalists are suggesting that this takes away from the responsibility of fossil fuel companies and our need to go to net zero. Another thing is, and I understand from Sandra that I think you've already supported these bipartisan bills, the SB 152 and SB 153, that provide more equitable access to energy with solar energy generation and a more resilient grid, making it solar power more affordable. And these bills are dedicate 30% of community solar capacity to low-income households. And I think you're already involved in that. One other thing I wanted to mention, if anybody's interested, I can share this with you now and later when we're finished. But the Michigan Climate Action Network has created a candidate forum questionnaire. So if you attend a forum for candidates running for office, they have prepared a climate questionnaire to ask to various candidates. And I find this to be very valuable. Okay, getting back to the IRA. How can your household benefit personally from the IRA climate law? There are rebates and tax credits that are provided for individual households to bring electric power and electric-powered appliances instead of gas to your household. So that means electric heat pumps and installing rooftop solar, battery storage, rebates for or tax credits for electric vehicles. And the best source of information for this is something called the Rewiring America calculator. And this organization, Rewiring America, is an excellent source of information on the entire IRA in terms of implementing this for you personally. And I think I can open, well, no, I can't open it in this mode. But what you do is you plug in your zip code and it tells you the tax credits you're entitled to and the rebates by state. And the way it works under this law is the higher your income, the more likely you will have tax credit benefits. The lower your income, the more likely you will have these rebates. Okay, and of course, when you do your taxes, it's on the form, the tax credits for the IRA. In terms of the rebates, they are coming out state by state. They are not all available at this point. And this is a link that would take you to the updated status of where we are with these rebates in your state. And again, going back to the Rewiring America, they provide a list of how to electrify all of your household. They tell you not just a list, but they tell you how to do this, you know, that you check your electric panel, that you get a home energy assessment, that you replace your water heater with a heat pump if it's older than 10 years, and, you know, replace your gas stove with an electric induction cooktop, electric dryer, et cetera, et cetera. It's huge. And I won't go into all the details here unless somebody asks me a question and I can open this material so we can look at it. And finally, as you all know, given that you're the League of Women Voters, elections matter, and we can build an environmental majority and elect environmental champions to office. And what the Michigan League of Conservation, it's a nonpartisan organization. What they do is they have created a national environmental scorecard where they bring up every single legislator in your district, both at the Senate level and the Congress level. And they have all the legislation and the votes that your legislator has made on that. So you can educate yourself and educate others on, you know, their environmental policies and where they stand, not just what they say, but how they vote. So I feel that this is very, very important. And I think perhaps it's something that you could include in some of your information. I don't know. So I will end on this poem, which is by a Nigerian poet. And she just says, start now, start where you are. Start with fear, start with pain, start with doubt. Start with hands shaking, with voice trembling, but start and don't stop. Start where you are with what you have, just start. Thank you very much. So I will end there.
Well, thank you so much, Jackie and Robin. That was those are wonderful presentations. And so it is close to 8 o'clock, but we have time for a couple of questions. And we have one from Ann Scott. She just wanted to ask if you could clarify on the Michigan Clean Energy Law that was just adopted in 2023. What specifically do you think needs to be done? And this goes to Jackie to improve it.
Well, I would actually send you to the website of the Michigan Climate Action Network to look at I have a link which I can provide for you, because they're essentially saying that they should remove from the law sources like biogas, nuclear energy, and natural gas with carbon capture, because the critics are saying, as I said before, that these are false solutions. That's what the environmentalist critics are saying about that particular law. And I'm happy to provide you with much more detail about that.
Right. And as you know, it was a tough thing to get the law passed to begin with. And so we had to take some compromises, but you know, we need to go back and try to fix the things that weren't done correctly. So let's see. And there is a comment here that the league did support the Senate bills on community solar, SB 152 and 153, and Judy put in a card for that at the hearing, and I know that there were some individuals from the league who went and testified for that. So I don't see any other questions. I could, if somebody wants to raise their hand, if you have a question you haven't put in the chat. Otherwise, I just want to say thank you to our presenters and to all of you for coming. We know this is very important, and we just have to keep doing it, or start, as the poem said. So I guess that's it. Thank you all for coming, and it was a great presentation. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. And Judy, you want to stop the recording?